Okay. Shalom, everybody. Today, January 16th, 2023, Parshat Va'era, second Parsha in the book of Shemot, which, as an overview, it will begin the narrative of the plagues. We've been introduced to Moses. We've been introduced to Aaron. We had on Shabbos, I had a presentation about Moses being placed in the basket, the moral grandeur of Pharaoh's daughter, the moral grandeur of Moses himself for intervening the way he did, and all of that really picking up on a theme that was part of the week's theme, the anniversary of the Yortzeit of Abraham Joshua Heschel, which coincides with the Martin Luther King Day weekend today, Martin Luther King Day. And so moral grandeur is a theme. And while I didn't make that the central theme of today, it certainly dovetails with what we're going to get to, which is a theme of leadership and really a theme of moral leadership too. And there'll be examples of that. So I'm focusing here on chapter 7 in the book of Shemot, which is the title of the chapter is Moses and Aaron make their first presentations to Pharaoh. We saw some of that last year when Moses himself goes to the Nile and speaks to Pharaoh in the morning. We talked about that in a previous class and had a lot of fun with that, because the tradition does try to understand that in a number of ways, including to ridicule Pharaoh and to make Pharaoh into a human being, not a god. I'm not going to focus on that, obviously. I want to focus on another small detail of the story. And as you have seen in this method here, that from the small details, we actually get quite a lot. And that the Torah, what makes the Torah so amazing to study and really gives us a lot of pleasure and joy, is that it compresses in a word or two, a chosen word, a chosen phrase, something that kind of kindles an idea and then enables you, the reader, the person studying in a group like ours, to extrapolate from that and really ask, well, why does it choose this word, and why does it choose it, and why does it choose this detail, and what's so important about that? And from that, we get a number of plausible interpretations and backstories, and also, I think most importantly, some important lessons, some very important lessons. So today, the lesson will focus on something related to leadership and what leaders need to do. So let's go right into the text here, and I call this the little details of the story. And it's taken me about 2.5 years to realize that when I share a screen of text, people like it large and bold. Mm-hmm. Nod if you agree. Yes, you do. I'll tell you something. Sometimes I watch these YouTubes of Israeli, they're the Israeli Parsha people. I learn a lot from them, and what they haven't learned is how to share a screen, because and I'm like, we all need this. Okay, so here we go, and I'm using the Everett Fox translation here. So where it has Yud He Vav He, that's the untranslatable name of God, unpronounceable. I'm just going to say God, okay? But Yomer Adonai al Moshe, God said to Moses, Moshe, see, I make you as a god for Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet, which is in itself an enormous statement. You are to speak all that I command you, and Aaron, your brother, is to speak to Pharaoh so that he may send free the children of Israel from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart. I will make my signs and my portents many in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not hearken to you, so I will set my hand against Egypt and I will bring out my forces, my people, the children of Israel from the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. So here, I mean, I just want to stop and just, go back and say, yeah, we understand. This is the showdown is now starting. This is Pharaoh versus, this is God versus Pharaoh. And that however complicated it is to understand, akshe et leif bar, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and what that means, in terms of how Pharaoh's own freedom is now going to be restricted. I think that that's one of the central messages in the story. One of the themes of the story is that it's Pharaoh is made to be not free, and God is totally free. And what freedom is the ability to work over your instincts and over your natural inclinations. And if his natural inclination is stubbornness, that itself is is restricting Pharaoh's freedom. So what you have here is really the theme of freedom in this whole notion of hardening the heart. In addition, there are Egyptological references. Gary Rensburg and I had a conversation about this, that the whole notion of the hardened heart actually goes back to an Egyptian reference. We don't have to get into that now, and that's not where we're going. So Pharaoh will not hearken to you. I will set, and here he translates the vi as so. Vi is and, vi is but, vi is so. So I will set my hand against Egypt. I will bring out my forces, my people, the children of Israel, from the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. Bishvatim gdolim, and that is recognizable to us from the Passover story. Agana. V'yadu Mitzrayim, the Egyptians will know, ki ani Adonai, that I am God, when I stretch out my hand over Egypt and bring the children of Israel from their midst. And so I also, the Egyptological reference of the outstretched arm, right? You've seen that in many Egyptian paintings and pictures. I didn't produce any. I've done them in the past for us on the Parsha sheets. So Moses and Aaron did it as God had commanded them. Thus they did. Now, little footnote here for those of us, who may be reaching ripe ages. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 years old when they just got started. They were just getting started, okay, when they spoke to Pharaoh. Everett Fox in his commentary points out these are nice numbers, symbolic numbers, round numbers. 80, twice as 40. 40 is a symbolic number in the Bible. 83, the 3 is a number. All of that, important. God said to Moses and to Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, give you a portent, then say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, let it become a serpent, okay? So he's going to ask you for a sign, because that's Egypt. Egypt is all about that. Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and they did thus, as God had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Pharaoh too called for the wise men and for the sorcerers, that they too, the magicians of Egypt, should do thus with their occult arts. And they threw down each one his staff, and these became serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained strong-willed, and he did not hearken to them, as God had spoken. God said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is heavy with stubbornness. He refuses to send the people free. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. Here, he goes out to the Nile. Station yourself to meet him by the shore of the Nile, and the staff that changed into a snake take into your hand, and say to him, God, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, send free my people that they may serve me in the wilderness. But here you have not hearkened thus far. Thus says God, by this you shall know that I am God. Here I will strike with the staff that is in my hand upon the water that is in the Nile, and it will change to blood. The fish that are in the Nile will die, and the Nile will reek, and the Egyptians will be unable to drink water from the Nile. God said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the tributaries, over the Nile canals, over their ponds, and over their bodies of water, and let them become blood. There will be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, in the wooden containers and in the stoneware. Just, got to stop on, my literary sense here gets kindled here because it's such gorgeous, this is, and we could kind of do all the whole analysis. Naharoteim yeorehem, sorry, meme Mitzrayim, naharotam yeorehem, agmehem, mikveh memehem. 5 different kinds of bodies of water. Veyu dam, Mitzrayim, dam, etc. It's just a very powerful thing. But itzimu vavanim, in their wooden containers and their stoneware, right down to the vessel, their kitchenware, right? There's going to be blood in the kitchenware. And Fox commented that it may be that this is, itzva even, wood and stone. This is also the phrase, the word pair that is used with reference to idols. And so this may be a caustic kind of, pejorative statement against Egyptian idolatry, that there's going to be blood on their idols because they even bathe their idols. That's what he says. They bathe their idols. They take care of them. And so now Moses and Aaron did thus as God had commanded them. He raised the staff. It doesn't point out which one of them did, but it was Aaron who was supposed to. He raised the staff and struck the water in the Nile before the eyes of Pharaoh, before the eyes of his servants, and all the water that was in the Nile changed to blood. Notice that it's before Pharaoh and his servants, okay? So it's, the intended audience is the elite. The fish that were in the Nile died, and the Nile reeked, and the Egyptians could not drink the water from the Nile. The blood was throughout all the land of Egypt. So while the plague was being witnessed, the action was being witnessed by Pharaoh and his servants, right? Which would be the equivalent of, the White House and the Congress. Who gets affected by it? The whole nation gets affected by it. Okay, so I don't want to use this, analogy too bluntly, but that's what you have. You have the government, you have the leader and the government, and then the people. The people suffer because what is being experienced by the leader and the government. But the magician, this is a crucial. This is like, how are we going to show that this is nothing? The magicians of Egypt did thus with their occult arts, and Pharaoh's heart remained strong-willed, and he did not hearken to them as God had spoken. In other words, they're basically saying, look at that. They did a plague. They did a piece of magic. They made the Nile turn to blood. We can do that. We're expert magicians. This is Egypt. Egypt is all about magic, okay? So when Pharaoh sees that everything is turning to chaos, rather than, deal with the situation, he is going to show we can do it too, basically, okay? And therefore, he doesn't pay attention. His Pharaoh's heart remained strong-willed, and he did not hearken to them as God had spoken. But I think there's something else going on here, and that's why I highlighted this. Vayifen Paro, vayavo el beito, v'lo shat libo gam lazor. So Pharaoh faced about and came into his house. Neither did he pay any mind to this either. I think this is one of the crucial underestimated, undervalued verses of the whole story. It's such a lovely little minor moment that for me tells you everything you need to know for the reasons I'm going to explain in a moment, okay? I'm going to read it again. Vayifen Paro, he turns home. In other words, he's had this whole show. Moses turns the Nile to blood. The fish are dying. The people are gagging. The Nile stinks. And what does he do? He goes home. Okay. All Egypt had to dig around the Nile to drink water, for they could not drink from the waters of the Nile. And this is critical, right? He goes home and they have to dig trenches to see if they're dying of thirst, and it gets hot in Egypt, okay? 7 days were fulfilled after God had struck the Nile. God said to Moses, come to Pharaoh and say to him, thus says God, send free my people that they may serve me. Now, if you refuse to send them free, here I will smite your entire territory with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs. They will ascend, they will come into your house, your bedroom, your couch, into your servants' houses, in among your people, into your ovens, into your dough pans, unto you, unto your people, unto all your servants will frogs ascend. And that's how the chapter ends, okay? So I highlighted this, and the truth is I should have highlighted the rest of it, because I think even as I say it, you get the point. You get the point here that the text is, I think it's smashing you over the head with a 2x4 to draw the distinction between Pharaoh and his palace. And yes, he's got a whole house, a bedroom, a couch, but there's also the government's people, and among your people, into your ovens, your dough pans, right? Your people, your servants, all the frogs. In other words, the next plague that's going to get you where you live. I'm going to stop the share here, and then I got a question here, and then go ahead.
Okay, so I can't help thinking about what you had said, Rabbi, when we first started. What is a leader? So, if you compare what Hashem just said to Moses, he spoke to Moses, as opposed to, say, Joseph, he was with Joseph. So I can't help thinking, what makes a leader? Why did Hashem decide he feels really confident that Moses and Aaron, they're the guys? Even though Hashem, has to tell him what to do, but he felt in the back of his mind, this is the guy.
This is a great question. It's a great question, and it emerges out of a sense, I think a particularly modern sense, a modern egalitarian sense, in which we think that everybody is equally endowed with these capabilities and talents, and we do think that everybody has talent, but in addition, at the same time as we say that everybody has talent, we know, for example, that not everyone is able to dance, and not everyone is able to sing, and not everyone is able to think deeply, and people are endowed with different kinds of mental abilities and capabilities and physical talents, and all of that. Everybody has potential, to rise to them, and some people just rise above everybody, and some people are exceptional, and if we've been around exceptional people, you understand that there's a phenomenon that some people are just exceptional. Some people are just exceptionally smart. Some people are exceptionally talented. Some people are exceptional politicians, in the sense that they're able to lead with, and function. Okay, and I'm going to hold it there, because we're going to get to that, and maybe ask that question: Are there certain fundamental characteristics of the excellent that make them excellent in this regard? And the hint I've already given you. Okay, anybody else with a comment, question? Okay, we go on. Okay, so we got this. So I'm highlighting this. Pharaoh faced about and came into his house. Neither did he pay any mind to this either. So I'm going to review here. Moses and Aaron appear before Pharaoh, demonstrate the staff to serpent's trick. And the Egyptian replicate the trick. Aaron's staff swallows the Egyptian staffs. Pharaoh remains unmoved. God tells Moses, go to the Nile, warn Pharaoh that the Nile will turn to blood. God tells Moses to tell Aaron to strike the Nile with his rod. Moses tells Aaron, Aaron strikes the Nile turns to blood, and all the other bodies of water too. The magicians replicate the plague. Pharaoh's in mood. That's when he turns home. Why? Okay, the Nile turns to blood. The fish die. The Nile reeks. The people can't drink. There's blood over Egypt. The Egyptian magicians replicate the plague. Pharaoh hardened his heart, he ignores them. Vayifen Paro, he goes home. Velo shat libo gam lazod. He turns, it goes, and he doesn't pay attention. This is the superfluous detail. Why do we need to know this? This is the relationship to the crisis. That is to say, how does Pharaoh relate to the burgeoning crisis? And what is it about Pharaoh that does not enable him to see that what is going to happen is the equivalent of the forecast for Hurricane Ida coming barreling towards the coast of Florida, or whatever. We have these tools. We have radar tools. After our hurricane, right? When we knew that the hurricane was coming, okay, and you remember Governor Christie was saying, like very bluntly, saying, "If you don't evacuate, you're an idiot," like things like that. It was very blunt, okay, and because you knew you had maybe a day, 2, 3 days of warning, you could make provisions. You could, get your emergency supplies. You can stock up your pantries and fridges, or get your generators ready, and on and on and on and on. And then the hurricane would come, and then the emergency management team would already be in place the day before, and they would recognize, because of experience and because of knowledge, what was going to happen, which would be the hardest hit communities, where the people would go, et cetera, and what kinds of supplies they would need. Pharaoh, nothing. Okay. Now, it's debatable whether or not he is taking Moses seriously, and evidently he's not. Okay, and that's the whole point. Okay, so Vayipen Paro, he's detached. He's the seeking of personal refuge in a time of public crisis, when the people need him most, to be sharing their misfortune. He, like all despots, turns and takes care of himself. All right. So I'm gonna just I have Zelenskyy up here. I have to tell you, okay, so the war, regrettably is now, we're almost like a year into this, which is unbelievable to think about. Okay. But the most moving things that came out, in addition to many, many things, happened right at the beginning. I have to say, when I saw this, and this is the reason why I was inclined to this this reading of the text as follows. Do you remember this? I want you to read, to watch this carefully. Okay, and if I have, it's 30 seconds. If I have to play it twice, I'll play it twice. I'm going to try and make sure it's up. Go ahead.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде і далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
I think that was the most important 30 seconds of his life. Okay, I'm not exaggerating. I think it's the most important thing in his life. Elada, go ahead.
Unlike Parasha, President Zelenskyy involves all his everybody, all the people in the country. Parasha just makes the decision for himself, and surprisingly, his people do not rebel against him to react for the way that he's ignoring the threat. So it's a huge difference between these two leaders, definitely.
Absolutely. And so what, and the reason that the people of Egypt don't rebel is obvious. They're terrified of their leader. The leader is a despot, and the leader is the one that is so detached from the the people. You know what I had in my mind to show, and of course I didn't have a chance to find this. You know, in contrast to Zelensky, Vladimir Putin has a huge palatial retreat. Okay, I mean, there are like videos of this. It's on the Black Sea. It's just enormous, and he goes to retreat there, right? And you know, it's got palatial entertainment theaters in there and all that. You know, it's all for one man, and is so far removed from his people, and the people, you know, are so crushed in terms of their freedom to voice their opinion. If anybody in Russia expresses any dissent in any way, they'll be arrested, charged, and put in jail for a long time. So that's why people don't rebel. Okay, and the leader, he made a point, you know, of there was one scene shortly after they didn't talk about it, and of course, you know, he was wearing, you know, this, you know, they were newspaper articles putting the contrast, you know, Zelensky in his basically in his sweater and Putin in his $5,000, you know, down coat, you know, that kind of thing. So he's very far removed from the people. Let's go to Ruth and then Skip and then Helene. Go ahead.
This isn't necessarily a Pharaoh thing, because if we go back to a previous Pharaoh in the times of Joseph, he did prepare. He did not ignore tragedy. Joseph said, we're going to have 7 bad years. And the Pharaoh didn't turn around and go home and saying, okay, that's your problem. They set a whole thing into place where they would be prepared for the 7 bad years. So this was a shortcoming of this particular Pharaoh. It would have been, maybe it would have been possible to plan ahead like the other Pharaoh did.
I think it's a great insight. You know, it's interesting how the Bible itself relates to Pharaoh. Every Pharaoh is Pharaoh, and it's not Pharaoh Ramses, Pharaoh Thutmose, Pharaoh this, Pharaoh that. I mean, they all had different names, but to the Bible, they're all Pharaoh, okay, because it's all king, okay. And what you say is perfectly, you know, plausible, which is that the Joseph's Pharaoh, you could, you know, read the story carefully, and Joseph's Pharaoh is there's an ambiguous element to him. At least if you recall on our classes on him, I made him out to be someone who was concerned about his people, but also concerned about himself. Okay, he was concerned about the welfare of his people because out of self, you know, for his own needs. That is to say, the more I can keep my people, you know, taken care of, the more wealth I'll have in the kingdom and the more power I'll have. So he made this kind of bargain with them, and that bargain also exists with Joseph, because Joseph is the one that is going to make Pharaoh look good. And so the bargain is, I'm going to keep Joseph here as long as I can, because I know that he's indispensable, but I'm also going to make sure that he knows that I'm in power. And so that becomes, I think, a very, very bad bargain for Joseph, because we see at the end that Joseph really has no freedom. Joseph can't come and go as he pleases. He needs to, you know, petition Pharaoh in order to bury his father, rather humiliating, I think. And then at the end, he himself wants to have his bones carted out of Egypt, because I think it's a statement of recognition that you know, I'm not free and I want to be part of the larger story. The point is that Pharaoh was in tune and wanted good things and is benevolent with an asterisk, okay? This Pharaoh, the previous Pharaoh, by the way, is the ruthless one. He's the one that kills all the babies. This one is not that. This is a different Pharaoh. because the Pharaoh, which is the Pharaoh of the father of Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh, right? We spoke about this past Shabbos too. So he dies, okay? Because what enables Moses to return is the death of those who are seeking to avenge, and that must have included that Pharaoh. So this is a new Pharaoh, but it doesn't matter to the Bible. This Pharaoh and the genocidal Pharaoh are both pharaohs that don't know Joseph, and they don't have any relationship to the past, and they don't share any covenantal or promissory notes with the past. We have Helene and then Skip. Go ahead.
I'm good. So here's my question. What did you want him to do? A quick summary, right? The staffs, everybody knows what happens with the staffs. They're at the banks of the Nile. I love Cecil B. DeMille. And Pharaoh and his advisors and his whatever Congress is there. And Aaron touches the water and it turns to blood. The Egyptians are thirsty. What do you want Pharaoh to do? Pharaoh wants to show, in my opinion, that Moses is nothing. And so he turns his back and he walks in his house.
I want him to take him seriously. The whole story wants.
Well, of course we do, but
well, you're asking me, what do I want from him? What does God want from him? God wants freedom. Okay, let me hit this dead horse harder. Okay, what do we want? Freedom. What do we want it now? That's the theme. And he's not willing to give them freedom, and he doesn't care. What do we want him to do? We want him to care. What do we want him to do? We want him to free the Israelites. What do we want him to do? If he, so I don't want him to make opposition here. Of course, I don't want him to put up a fight. He doesn't put up a fight. I want him to say, okay, you're right. God is God, and here, go have your freedom. That's what I want. But it's going to take 10 stages to do that. Okay, he's got to learn that. He doesn't know that. And the reason why is because of precisely the configuration of the character here that the Torah is giving us. The character is configured in such a way that he's not a leader. He's a despot. He's a tyrant. A tyrant only wants to subjugate other people. And a tyrant doesn't want to listen to people. A tyrant wants, only what's good for him. And what's good for him is when everybody's suffering, I'm going to take my bath. Okay, I have some other comments on it in a second, but go ahead, Skip, and then Nanette. Go ahead.
Rabbi, let's circle back to the 30-second clip.
Yeah.
You didn't do this for no reason.
Okay.
I look at that clip, and Zelenskyy is not only making a statement to his people, he's making a statement to Putin.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And if you look at it, it's God, Moses making a statement to Pharaoh.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. And not only that, he was making a statement to the world.
Right.
We got to give him a credit. I mean, this was they were raining missiles on him, and it was a total emergency, and he understood. This is, I think, why there's a certain brilliance about it. He understood that I need to produce this image because they want me. He was saying, what do they want from me? They want me to they want me to get a lift to Poland. I'm not going to go. I'm not leaving my country. They want me to do what they did in Afghanistan, like the leaders of Afghanistan. When it collapsed, they got on planes and they left. I'm going to stay with my people. Okay, Nanette, John, go ahead.
So I just want to throw something else into the mix. Is it possible, Rabbi, that Pharaoh and definitely the Israelites, maybe they're not ready for change? I mean, just maybe.
So yes, it's possible. I mean, look, obviously the story is moving along that arc. That it wouldn't be a story if they got. I mean, Helene asked, "What do I want? I want them to leave. I want them to free the Israelites." But then, if he freed them, there wouldn't be a story. We wouldn't have a Passover Seder. I mean, all of this is working up to that point. There is a sense of both the protagonist and the antagonist have to have conflict here in order for there to be a story, and they have to learn something. And what does Pharaoh learn? Pharaoh learns that there's God, basically. John, go ahead.
Well, this goes to the question of political ability. Moses comes and gives a command to Pharaoh, says, you have to do this. And in politics, you have to he puts Pharaoh in a spot.
Yes.
Otherwise, if he gives in, then he looks weak in front of his people. The real genius of politics is to kind of know what the other person needs to accomplish what you want to do. So maybe a more diplomatic approach to Pharaoh might have been used, but the one where you just tell him what he has to do, I think you can be sure that won't work.
So you know, I'm going to answer you and agree and say, and answer you like rabbinically and say, would that people understood that, okay, that you could avoid conflict by simply listening, okay, and you could tamp down conflict by saying, you know, you have a point, okay, let's work it out, okay, rather than we're digging in our heels and we're going to fight over this. So the political decision is, what's the battle that needs to be fought, okay? And is the battle that needs to be fought worth the blood that's going to be spilled here, okay? You know, societies get divided in very tense situations, very big conflicts all the time. And the question is, you know, here, you know, and not to make anyone into Pharaoh, not into anyone into Moses, but you had a big demonstration in Israel over the weekend, 80,000 people coming out to Habima Theater. So the people on the right say, ah, they're hysterical. The people on the left say, you know, the people on the right are tyrants, okay? Somebody is saying something, okay? And the wise thing, in my opinion, you know, would be, okay, point made. And rather than dig in, which you could, to say, Ani HaGever, I'm the man, is to say, okay, let's everybody lower the temperature. Let's work it out, okay? But what we have now is a real conflict. Now, because the stakes are high. That's what it is. So what Pharaoh doesn't see here is the burgeoning conflict. Look, he could have, you know, it's silly to say this because the story obviously doesn't work. A lot of bloodshed happens in Egypt. A lot of suffering happens. A lot of misery happens. The Egyptians can't wait to get rid of the Israelites after, you know, 9 more of these, okay? And it all could have been avoided. And this is because of obstinacy. And obstinacy will lead to that. Okay? Let's go ahead, Ilana.
Just a little comment. It's not only Moses against Pharaoh, it's a God against their gods, because the blood in the Nile was a plague to their God, because the Nile was the Egyptians' God.
Definitely.
So it's also 2 different powers against each other.
Absolutely, and that's certainly one of the theological undercurrents of this. Let me just show you a couple of other important examples of leaders who go out into their people. Right, iconic photograph of Churchill. You know, the London is being destroyed in the Blitz, and look at him. I'm out. We are, you know, and he mobilized himself, and he said, I need to be with the people. Okay. I will show you another one. I hope this will come up. Do you see this one now? Another one, WHYY? No. So to do this again. All right. How about now?
Yeah, but we can see that picture.
You can see the
WHYY.
picture. This one? How about this one?
Yeah, we can see that.
That one you can see, Churchill
Yeah.
among the ruins.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now here, another one. This is what we showed you.
That's the first
Yeah.
one.
And
We can
one
see
more. I'm just gonna. I have to have so much dexterity here. This here. Okay, bunch of pictures, right? You can Google this and see, this is a real theme, and this is what a leader does. A leader goes out among the people, and this is the book about this, The Splendid and the Vile, on the Blitz, and these are the first picture was Churchill in there, and to this day we are very, very moved by this, because he's saying, this is my island, this is my home. I'm going to fight for my home. I'm not going to leave my home. I'm not going to be in a bunker. I'm going to be with the people. And in any film that you see about this, London and England in the Second World War, and I'm thinking of, which one, the last one, Dunkirk, on The Finest Hour, or The Speech, the King's Speech, all that. And they're fighting with them. They say, don't go out, it's dangerous for you. You read any biography of Churchill, and this is really because he understood. I mean, it was brilliant, but he understood this fact of leadership, which is, to be a leader, you go with your people regardless. Okay, let me go back. Yes, go ahead.
They also use language very well. When Zelenskyy kept using the word "put" there, it was like an emotional kind of, he pulls us all in. He pulls us all into what he's saying and how he's saying it. Churchill did that.
Exactly.
Churchill, yeah.
Okay.
He used language in such a way that everybody was there with him, because we felt that he was there with us.
Okay. So I just want to, I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to do this, but we have some commentary later on the verse. But I looked very hard to see if there was any medieval commentator, modern commentator who made this comment, and so I didn't see anything, which doesn't mean anything. Could mean that just nobody paid attention before. Vayifen Paro vayavo el beito. Okay, so Vayifen means he goes. Vayavo el beito means he goes home. Now, you know that the word bayit and going, vayavo, has all sorts of little overtones to it. Okay, if you go back to Joseph and Potiphar's wife, there's lots of bayit and there's lots of home and there's lots of vayavo there. And nobody makes this comment, which is why I'm going to put it in a big footnote, which is there's a sexual element to this. Okay, and I think that this would be my homiletical comment, which is everybody's suffering, and I'm going home, and I'm going to have sex. Yeah. Vayavo beito. Okay, I'm not going to do that then. Sometimes I know I put things on the Parasha sheet that get people really kind of annoyed, but is it not a plausible explanation? It's a euphemism. There's a euphemism here that he's taking, he's doing what is own. Look, the commentaries do say one thing, okay, which is Vayavo beito la'asot tzrachav. He goes home to do whatever he needs to do, okay? So whatever he needs to do could be, he needs to watch television, okay? Who knows? All right. Leave it there. All right. So the speeches you mentioned, what is it about? There are many things to read. Home is the sanctuary, home is the palace, home is the structure that he's retreating to, as opposed to the Nile, to which he has already been that morning. He goes home, detaches from the situation, or to ponder his responses. Again, this is the instinct of the tyrant, the coward. In so doing, he signals to the people that they are on their own, that he will not stand with them. This is the signal from the outset that everything is lost, like Afghanistan, where the leaders left. And the expression "vishat libo" is rare enough. The word calls out for interpretation is "gam lazot," this also. He doesn't pay attention to this also. What are the other things that he doesn't pay attention to? What could they be? It says that he has been thrown off. He doesn't know what to do. Then on the one hand, he hardens his heart to their plight. On the other hand, he wants to ignore everything. That is what we are learning. And this is what Moses has to exploit. Pharaoh's indifference to the plight of the Egyptians, which also stands in contradistinction to God's concern for Israel and his instinctive obstinacy. Let us remember that this is not the same Pharaoh enacted the genocidal decrees. That Pharaoh died. This Pharaoh may not be as driven by cruelty, but he's still quite cruel. Worse, he is indifferent to his people's suffering. And he's not convening a National Security Council, no preparedness, no going on alert. There is, in the end, total arrogance. So I made reference to some medieval commentary. Here's Saforno. He didn't pay attention to this. So they're going to focus in on what is it that he's not paying attention to. He didn't recognize or distinguish the difference in this instance as well between God's act and the magician's act. Because with regard to God's act, there was a total change in the nature of the Nile, an entity that was considered to be totally unchangeable, incapable of being damaged, and he changed it into real blood, so much so that the fish died. In other words, what Saforno is saying is that the focus is in the verse, it's gum et this too, right? It's velo shat libo gam lazot, to this also. And so that raises the question, well, what does that mean? He doesn't pay attention to this also. And this is, another shade of meaning here, which is that what makes this face-off between God and Pharaoh very interesting is that God is emerging as being totally caring and totally attentive to the needs of the people, okay? That's how God will emerge. The needs of the people are freedom. And what Pharaoh is not attentive to the reality that's in front of him, that this is not a usual event. This is not just magic, right? That's what he's saying. This is not magic. Magic is, I turn it to blood. This is a total change in the nature. That's the Saforno, and this is picked up again. I didn't finish. So much so that the fish died, and the acts of magicians were simply changes that could be changed, and maybe they did was simply an illusion. Okay, so he's ignoring it. Okay, at his peril. And here another commentator, Gam Lazot. It wasn't simply enough that he did not relent to set Israel free, but he didn't really care. Elalo shat libo, to get advice about supplying water to the state, when it was clear in his mind that this was simply sorcery. I'm sorry, she'eno ella kishuf, that this was, the bad translation. When it was clear in his mind that this was simply, that though this was only sorcery, in a few hours it would pass the way magic generally tends to do. In other words, he didn't care about his people. Let them eat cake. Let them drink blood. Let them starve. Let them thirst. Let them die. That's what's going on here. And so our story then becomes, framed now in these terms. It's framed in terms of what is empathy, what is compassion, what is caring, and what is arrogance. Okay, and that's really the point. The point is that all of this is leading to is that this is total arrogance. That's what the last point that I had on my little sheet here. No going on alert. In the end, it's total arrogance. Okay, and that's what is driving this. This is, and of course Moses emerges as the archetype of humility, and Pharaoh, of course, emerges as the archetype of arrogance. So Bob, we haven't heard yet. Go ahead.
I really, really like the analysis, and it reminds me of two of my favorite quotes, one which you included in a previous Parasha sheet from Elie Wiesel, that the opposite of love is not hate, but indifference.
Yeah.
And the second quote from Rabbi Hilsenrath of blessed memory, that sometimes it's easier to change the world than to change oneself.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, I think from a Hasidic perspective, one of the questions is Pharaoh, what is the Pharaoh within each of us? What is the Mitzrayim within each of us? So that besides the political overtones, what is the message of this story for each of us to the degree we can become free, we can be leaders by transforming ourselves and by caring?
Absolutely. And the story, one of the beauties of reading the Bible is that we have so many different panim, so many different vantage points to read it with. And one of them, as you are saying, I'll just say it's allegory. This is an allegory, not of a political showdown, but of an internal showdown. And that's a plausible allegory. And of course, you're quite right. The mystical tradition, the Hasidic tradition, and to a certain extent, the moralistic tradition within Judaism sees all of these stories, in allegorical terms, for reasons that are I want to say both plain and not so plain. That is to say, if the premise is if everything is in the Torah, then we ought to be able to see the whole universal human condition in the Torah. And so therefore, Moses and Pharaoh are not characters and entities in and of themselves. They're also symbolic values. And they're also symbolic exemplars of, in their respective cases, Moses' humility and Pharaoh arrogance. And so therefore, what do you need to do, as you correctly say, to subsume the Pharaoh? I have a more accessible kind of image, and since these are Passover stories, we get to the four sons, Chacham, Rasha, Tam, She'eno Yodeh Lishol, the wise, the wicked, the simple, the one who doesn't ask. So I think the most, one of the most compelling interpretations is, all those four sons, those four children reside in every one of us. And at any given time, sometimes our wisdom emerges, sometimes our, ruthlessness, our frailty, sometimes our simplicity emerges. And so here, the joy of reading a text like this is, can I see myself in each of the characters? And the answer is, you better, right? There's an urgency to see that even you have the potential to be a Pharaoh and to be indifferent and to be apathetic and to turn away. I read this and go like, and it was before you asked your question, Bob. What is there a time when I'm more concerned about myself than I am about others or about the need of the community, etc. And that's a hard question, because especially in our modern understanding of leadership, you do need to take care of yourself. You do need to differentiate. You do need to kind of go on a retreat. You do need to do all of that. Okay. But what happens if you're away somewhere and there's an emergency in the shul? It depends on how far you're away. If it's feasible, and you're capable of getting back. I mean, this happens to me on a regular basis, and some people get completely burnt out by this, and some people, have no personal life. The balance between that is really the art here. But Pharaoh doesn't get out. Pharaoh, this is a crisis. This is a national emergency. Okay, you can't run to the palace in a national emergency. I mean, Zelenskyy, that 30 is ultimately going to be the symbolic statement. In a national emergency, I'm not having, a private dinner with my wife. I'm out on the street, and life is at stake here. And if this is where I need to be, and this is where I need to be, it's dangerous. The missiles and shells are falling all over the place. Okay, but damn it, this is where we need to be. This is the Churchillian moment. Go ahead, John.
Well, I hear very clearly your criticism of Pharaoh not being with his people, but I ask, are we not projecting our own ideas of what a good leader is onto Pharaoh, who took place such a long time ago and had such different ideas of what the role of a leader was? Is it fair to criticize him in that along those lines?
Why not?
It's a great question, and so here it would say, I guess I'm gonna kind of answer it by saying there are universal qualities to human beings and human behavior, and they're universal qualities of leadership. Why is it that a Zelenskyy and a Churchill and a Lincoln and a Washington and others throughout history who have understood that I need to be with I need to be with the people. So, and that the people feed off of this. And it's, I think for a good leader, they understand this. It's instinctive. It's instinctive. They understand something that is really not spelled out in a textbook, because there's no textbook for this. And that is, and the way I teach Moses is, I'm a part of the people, but I'm differentiated from the people. I'm with them, but I need to be apart from them. I feel what they feel, but I also need to lead them. Pharaoh this is the moment where he's not a part of the people, because if he had just one little ounce of empathy, he got a phone call from, the people in the town over that suddenly have no water, right? And he's, instead of slamming down the phone, he would say, let's solve this problem, because it's going to get worse. And that's, I don't know if it's, I mean, obviously that's a ridiculous analogy to that time, but I don't know if, if you're the king, you have to be concerned about your subjects. Otherwise, I had a teacher at the seminary who said, you could get up and say, and castigate people all the time. So, and you get up and you say, I'm the king and you're nothing. So what's the end? You're the king over nothing. And that's exactly what happens. He's the Pharaoh. The people are not worthy. I'm the king over you. I'm the king over the non-worthy. And that's, precisely where the story is going to go. Skip, and then we have to end. I have a hard closure here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just a quick comment. And we're talking about leadership.
Yep.
And I think in Zelensky's case, he really pointed out one fact that a leader has to have.
Yes.
Is understanding and knowing his audience.
Absolutely.
In Zelensky's case, it was understanding not only the people's need, okay, but also telling Putin, hey guy, this is what you're stepping into.
Yep.
And then telling the world, reassuring the world. And in those 30 seconds, I think that's what he did.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I said that, some people have a gift for leadership, and he had a gift for that moment, understanding that the visual image, he needed to make a statement. And the statement was, I am here, he's here, he's here. And he had the whole cabinet in back of him. We're all here. We're not going anywhere. Neither is anybody. Thank you. Have a good night. That's basically what he was saying. And here we are so many months later, almost a year later, and they're still there. And the reason, why they're still there, 99% of that reason is because imagine the opposite. Okay. And this, unfortunately, we have to end with. Imagine the opposite. Imagine if he cowered in his bunker and then got, an airlift out, because everyone was offering him at the time. You remember, they were all saying, get on a plane, we'll take you anywhere. Imagine he did that. There would be no morale left in Ukraine. They'd be finished. And that's what they were anticipating. Putin was anticipating that's what was going to happen. Okay. All right. On this, we have to end. I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to next week, and we'll see you. Have a lovely day, lovely week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.